Ray Bennett had just shut down the shop for the night, hands still stained with oil, when the landline rang. No one called the landline anymore. He thought it might be a telemarketer. Instead, it was Linda, his former sister-in-law. Her voice was tight, the kind people use when they're asking for something they shouldn't. "Ray," she said, "it's Troy. He's in liver failure, stage 4. You're the only match." Ray didn't speak. He just stared out at the fading daylight beyond the garage doors. Troy, the same half-brother who lied, framed him for theft, and walked away with their father's land. 7 years ago, Ray lost everything. His business reputation, his home, even his marriage. Because Troy couldn't stand the idea of sharing the Bennett name or the Bennett legacy. And now that same man needed a piece of him to stay alive. Linda kept talking, but Ray wasn't listening anymore. The past was crashing through him like a freight train. He remembered the look in their father's eyes the day the sheriff pulled Ray out of the shop in handcuffs. Not disappointment, confusion, like he couldn't believe it either. But Troy made sure the doubt stuck. Ray spent 2 nights in county jail and lost the trust of a whole town. Troy inherited everything while Ray rebuilt his life in silence, turning wrenches in a rental garage and living in a trailer behind it. "I know it's a lot to ask," Linda said, her voice cracking, "but he doesn't have much time." Ray hung up without answering. He looked down at his hands, scarred, steady, still strong. "He wants my liver?" he muttered. "Tell him to come dig it out himself." 7 years ago, Ray Bennett was respected, steady, and proud owner of Bennett Automotive, just like his father had been before him. He had a spotless military record, a loyal customer base, and plans to expand the shop to include a second bay. Life was simple, honest, and earned. Then came the firestorm. An anonymous tip claimed Ray had been running a stolen parts racket through the shop. Falsified invoices, missing inventory, money under the table. It made no sense, but the evidence was airtight. Falsified logbooks, phone calls from a burner cell traced back to his account, and worst of all, a customer complaint forged in his handwriting. The sheriff didn't even ask questions. Ray was arrested mid-shift in front of half the damn town. Within weeks, the damage was done. Local suppliers cut ties, customers vanished. His army pension froze pending investigation. His wife, already on edge from years of rural living, left with a single duffel bag in the truck they shared. But the part that twisted deepest, his father, Old Man Bennett, who'd built that shop with his bare hands after Korea, looked him in the eye and asked, "Did you do it, son?" The look in his face when Ray couldn't find the words. It cracked something in Ray that never healed. Troy, ever the opportunist, played the role of the clean-cut brother who was shocked and hurt. But while Ray was busy trying to survive, Troy stepped in, claimed Ray's shop lease was under review, petitioned the family lawyer to revise their father's will. For Ray's sake. 6 months later, their dad died of a stroke, and Troy walked away with the house, the land, and what was left of their inheritance. Ray was left with nothing but a tarnished name and an empty garage. He never got an apology, never got the truth, just a mess of rumors and whispers. But deep down, Ray always knew. Troy set him up. He just couldn't prove it. Not yet. Ray didn't go to Mercy General out of compassion. He went because he wanted to look Troy in the eye. He wanted to see what a dying liar looked like. The hospital smelled like bleach and cheap coffee, a far cry from the grease and metal Ray was used to. He hated every second of it. When he stepped into the ICU waiting room, Linda stood up fast, eyes puffy from crying, clutching her purse like it might protect her from the past. "Ray, thank you for coming," she said, like this was a family reunion and not a reckoning. He said nothing. A nurse led him into the room where Troy lay like a ghost of himself, pale and hooked up to machines, but still wearing that same smug grin that had followed Ray through every ruined year. "Look who finally showed up," Troy rasped. "Guess you heard I'm in need." Ray stared at him. No anger, no pity, Just silence. After a long beat, he pulled a folded sheet of paper from his coat and tossed it on the bedside tray. "I'll consider the transplant," he said flatly. "But first, you sign this." Troy squinted, then laughed. "A confession? You serious?" Ray crossed his arms. "You framed me. You cost me my business, my marriage, and our father. You want my liver, you give me my name back." Troy shook his head slowly, his voice soft but sharp. "You'd let your own brother die over a piece of paper?" Ray leaned in close, his voice steady as steel. "You're not my brother. Brothers don't stab each other in the back." Linda stepped between them, her voice cracking. "Ray, please. He's not well. Can't we just—" "No," Ray cut her off. "You all had your chance to come clean when it mattered. Now it's on my terms." He turned and walked out without looking back, the beeping machines behind him fading like distant lies. In the hallway, the nurse glanced at him. "Will you be coming back?" Ray didn't break stride. "I came to offer him a lifeline, not forgiveness." The idea hit Ray like a gut punch on the drive home. Something about Troy never added up. Their dad, Harold Bennett, was strict but fair. Ray grew up under that man's thumb, every mistake punished, every success earned. Troy? Different story. Their father never laid a hand on him, gave him second chances Ray never got, always called him the smart one, while Ray busted knuckles and bled through his boots to earn half the praise. That night, unable to sleep, Ray dug out the old tin lockbox from his closet, the one with their dad's war medals, birth certificates, and a half-faded photo of their mom, smiling beside some unknown man in a judge's robe. Something in Ray's gut twisted. He called Lena Harrow the next morning, an old army medic turned local doctor who never asked stupid questions. "Can you help me get a DNA test?" he asked. "You think Troy's not your brother?" she asked flatly. "I think he ain't who he says he is." The results came back in 5 days. Ray sat alone at his kitchen table, staring at the envelope, beer untouched. He opened it with a pocket knife. Probability of full sibling relation, 0%. The blood drained from his face. All the years of doubt, all the double standards, all the gut feelings. They weren't paranoia. They were prophecy. The next stop was the assisted living center in Oak Hill, where their mother Beverly spent her days watching reruns and dodging the past. Ray walked in without calling ahead. She looked up from her recliner and froze. "Raymond, what brings you here?" He didn't answer, just placed the DNA results on her lap. "You want to explain this?" Her face paled as she read. Your father? He wasn't well when Troy was born. I didn't want to destroy what little piece he had left." "You destroyed me instead," Ray said. "Who's his real father?" Her eyes flickered to the photo he'd brought. The judge, Richard Halston, their old family friend. She nodded slowly. "It was one mistake," she whispered. "No," Ray snapped. "One mistake is forgetting a birthday. This is betrayal wrapped in 30 years of lies." He turned to leave. "Please," Beverly said, voice cracking. "Don't tell anyone." Ray looked back, dead in the eyes. "Oh, I'm telling everyone. Starting with the man who raised another man's bastard while beating the truth into me." As he walked out into the fading light, something had shifted. This wasn't just about a transplant anymore. This was about a man reclaiming what was stolen. Not just his land or his name, but the truth. Ray didn't just want answers now. He wanted proof. Not just to expose Troy, but to reclaim every inch of ground lost to lies. So he paid a visit to Eli Cordell, the family lawyer who'd handled Harold Bennett's will. The office was old, tucked above a barber shop on Main, still smelling like stale cigars and old paper. Eli looked nervous when Ray walked in. "Ray," he said, clearing his throat. "It's been Vales a long time." Ray didn't bother with pleasantries. He dropped a copy of the DNA results on the desk. "You knew, didn't you?" Eli stared at the paper too long. "I suspected." But your mother insisted it stay buried, said it would do more harm than good. Ray leaned in. What about the will? Dad's signature looked shaky, and the date was a week after he had that minor stroke. Eli winced. That's complicated. Cut the crap, Ray said. Did Troy alter it? The silence said everything. Finally, Eli nodded once. He came in with an updated version. Claimed your father dictated it to him. I had doubts, but I didn't push. Honestly, I was afraid. Ray stood up, jaw tight. Afraid of what? Of losing my license, or worse, crossing the Halston family. You know who Troy's real father is, don't you? Ray smiled coldly. Yeah, and he's about to find out too. As he left the law office, the sun caught on the bronze plaque outside, in service of truth and legacy. The irony made his lip curl. Ray had been raised to believe legacy meant blood, land, and good work. But what had Troy inherited? A lie. A lie wrapped in privilege, sealed with a judge's silence, and signed over in a dead man's name. He stopped by the county records office that afternoon and requested everything tied to the Bennett estate. The clerk gave him a flash drive and an odd look. Didn't think that place had any drama, she said. Ray just nodded. You'd be surprised. Later that night, sitting with Lena in his trailer, Ray showed her the forged documents, side by side with earlier drafts from years before. Different signatures, different dates, different intent. This is fraud, Lena said. You could take him to court. Ray shook his head. Not yet. Not until I make sure everyone sees it. I want his whole life crumbling the way he let mine rot. Lena raised her glass. To justice? Ray raised his. To consequences. He stared at the computer screen, a plan forming. He didn't need revenge. That came fast. He needed it done right. Public. Permanent. Ray didn't show up at the hospital the next day out of mercy. He showed up wired. Hidden in the inside pocket of his denim work jacket was a tiny recorder Lena helped him set up. He walked through the automatic doors like a man carrying a storm. Inside Troy's room, the air was thick with quiet panic. Machines humming, nurses whispering just outside. Troy was weaker now, jaundiced and gaunt, but the arrogance was still in his voice. Did you come to save me or spit on my grave? He asked. Ray pulled up a chair, took his time. Neither. I came for the truth. He pulled a worn envelope from his pocket and slid it onto Troy's lap. You and I both know you doctored Dad's will, and we both know I went to jail for something you did. So here's your chance. You talk, I think about giving you what you need. Don't, and you'll die the liar you lived. As Troy scoffed. You've always been dramatic. You think this story ends with you riding in like some hero? Dad didn't even want you running the shop. Said you had more grit than brains. Ray didn't blink. Dad's not here to speak for himself. You are. Troy stared at him, then gave a shallow laugh. Fine. You want it? Here it is. I made it all up. The parts racket, the fake invoices, the staged complaint. I've fed every bit of it to the cops. You were getting too much attention, too much respect. People liked you. I couldn't have that. Ray's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Troy kept talking. And the will? I forged the signature. Dad was already slipping. Barely remembered his birthday, let alone estate documents. I knew if he left it the old way, you'd get the land and I'd get the bills. So I fixed it. Sue me. Ray reached into his pocket and clicked off the recorder with a small beep. Troy's face drained. You son of a... You just signed your own damn death warrant, Ray said quietly. That recording's going to every land office, veterans board, and newspaper from here to Columbus. You'd ruin me just to prove a point? No, Ray said, rising to his feet. I'd ruin you because it's the only justice I've got left. Troy wheezed, his voice cracking. And the transplant. Ray paused at the door. Now that depends. How fast can you put that confession in writing? Before Troy could answer, Linda entered the room, her eyes flicking between them. What's going on? Ray turned to her, steel in his voice. Your husband's finally telling the truth. And once he signs his confession, I'll consider saving his sorry life. But I'm not handing over a damn thing until every lie is in ink and notarized. Linda looked at her husband. You did all that? Troy didn't answer. He just closed his eyes. Ray looked back one last time. If you want to live, start writing. Then he walked out, leaving the weight of truth behind him, and the door wide open for justice. 2 days later, Ray returned to the hospital, not with sympathy but with a manila folder. The power in the room had shifted. Troy was thinner, weaker, and his voice barely rose above a whisper, but the smirk was gone. In its place was fear. Ray set the folder down on the tray table beside Troy's bed and opened it with deliberate care. Inside were 2 documents, one titled Statement of Full Confession, the other Affidavit of Fraud and Forgery. You sign both, Ray said flatly, and I schedule the transplant. Troy blinked slowly. And if I don't? Ray didn't flinch. Then you die with your lies, and I walk out of here clean. Linda, seated in the corner with bloodshot eyes, leaned forward. Ray, please? There's got to be a better way to… No, he cut her off. You stood by him when he burned my life down. If you want a second chance, it starts with this. He turned back to Troy. This is the price. Not a penny more, not a word less. Troy reached for the pen, hand trembling. You'll really help me if I sign? Ray nodded once. Help, not forgive. It took several minutes, but Troy signed both papers. The sound of the pen scratching against paper was the only noise in the room, and Ray never broke eye contact. When it was done, Ray gathered the documents and stood. One more thing, he said. A copy of these goes to every authority who once had my name in their files, every employer who turned me away, every neighbor who whispered behind my back. Troy's head dropped to the pillow. Guess you finally got your revenge. Ray looked down at him, his face unreadable. This isn't revenge. This is the cost of truth. He walked out of the hospital with the folder under his arm, the weight of justice finally tipping in his favor. For the first time in years, Ray Bennett wasn't a man on defense. He was in control. And he wasn't done yet. Ray didn't throw a party. He didn't make speeches. He just showed up to the county land office with Troy's signed confession and a lawyer Lena referred him to. 2 weeks later, he stood at the edge of his father's old property, the same land he'd been exiled from, holding a deed with his name on it. No asterisks, no footnotes, just Raymond C. Bennett, rightful owner. The front porch still leaned left, the barn roof sagged with age, but it was home again. Ray ran his hand over the weathered fence post, the wood rough beneath his fingers like an old scar that had finally stopped bleeding. He didn't smile. He just exhaled, long and deep, like a man who had carried a cinder block on his chest for years and finally set it down. The local veterans group invited him to speak at their monthly meeting after the local paper ran his story. Framed veteran cleared after 7 years. Family confession changes everything. He declined the microphone, said all he wanted was his name cleared and his shop rebuilt. A week later, they pulled together enough donations to help him reopen Bennett Automotive, right where it used to be. His first customer, the same sheriff who arrested him years ago. The man said nothing, just handed over his keys and nodded. That was enough. As for Troy, he survived the transplant but lived in a run-down trailer on the edge of town, far from the house he once stole. No more big dinners, no more fundraisers, no more nameplates on fancy real estate brochures. Just a man with a failing liver, and no one left to fool. Ray visited once, not to talk, just to leave a book on the porch. The Art of War, bookmarked on the page that read, "When the enemy is falling, do not press him too hard." Back home, Ray sat on the porch, boots propped on the railing, watching the sun dip behind his barn. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt right. Justice hadn't made him rich or whole, but it had made him honest again. And in a world full of lies, that was enough. The porch creaked as Ray leaned back in his old rocker, boots crossed, a fresh cup of black coffee cooling in his hands. The barn door hung open like it always did when his father was alive, letting in the wind and the ghosts. He thought about what it had cost. 7 years of silence, of shame, of being the name folks whispered about but never spoke to. He had lost time, trust, and the better part of his life rebuilding what one man's lies had broken, but the truth had finally done what lawyers and apologies never could. It made him whole again. His name was clean, his land was his conscience clear. Still, he didn't feel victorious, just tired. On the table beside him lay a yellowed photo. He and Troy as kids, fishing poles in hand, their father between them. A picture from before the lies, before the bloodlines got blurred and the backstabbing began. He didn't know why he kept it, but he couldn't quite throw it away either. Not yet. His phone buzzed. A message lit the screen. It was from Amy, his daughter. They hadn't spoken much since the scandal. She'd been 22 when it happened, full of anger and half-truths, and she'd sided with what she thought was right at the time. The text was simple. Saw the article. Proud of you. Can we talk? Ray stared at it for a long moment. Then he typed 2 words back. Any time, sweet. He sat there as the sun dropped behind the trees, the weight in his chest finally less than the peace in his bones. He hadn't wanted revenge. He'd wanted the truth. And even though the truth came with scars, it also brought back something he thought was gone forever. His dignity. And maybe, just maybe, something more. Ray Bennett's story reminds us that dignity isn't given, it's earned, often in silence and pain. He lost years to a lie, but he never lost himself. He didn't chase revenge, he demanded justice. And when the time came, he didn't scream or break things. He just laid out the truth, piece by piece, until no one could ignore it. In a world full of cover-ups and shortcuts, that kind of grit matters. Sometimes, doing the right thing costs everything, but looking in the mirror and knowing you didn't fold? That's priceless. Call to action. If this story hit you somewhere real, if you've ever been burned, betrayed, or pushed aside and still stood tall, like this post. Subscribe for more stories about men who fight to reclaim what's theirs. And share this with someone who needs to be reminded that it's never too late to set the record straight. Truth matters. Dignity matters. And men like Ray, they're still out there. Maybe you're one of them.